welcome to another episode of All About Dat Base, the series where I show you how to make some pretty cool bases for your miniatures. Now, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about lava. Now, lava bases is something that I have struggled with ever since I first started basing. And it's very difficult to get that kind of natural flowing look just using a flat surface and some paint. So I've done some experimenting and I've come up with a method that I like, involving making it a bit more textured and trying to make it look a bit more like the lava is flowing. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I do that. So let's head to the table and I'll see you in a bit. So this is the effect we're going for with this base. So it's quite a glossy, shiny one, and the lava flow has got a little bit of life to it. It kind of almost looks like it's moving a little bit, and we've got these little bubbles and things like that. So I quite like the aesthetic of this. I like that it's glossy and almost glowing. So my first two attempts at lava came out like this. Now, they're not too bad, I don't think. I've used something slightly more gritty with more texture for the rocks. But what I find about using this method, where you just paint red, leave it to dry, paint orange, leave it to dry, and then put some bits of yellow on everything on, it looks good from a distance, but close up, you can kind of see that it's just lots of dots and lines, and I'm not as keen on the aesthetic from a close-up. So I wanted to do something that looked less painted and a bit more organic, which is why I came up with this idea of something that's where basically I've manipulated the paints while they were wet instead. So the first thing we're going to do is obviously take our base. So again, this is just one of my wooden offcuts from the wooden Citadel paint rack, and I quite like using these for practice bases. So to build up the black here, I'm going to be using Cork. Now I've got this. I got this off eBay. I think it was about £1.50. Now it's a very thin strip of cork that's wound in a big ring, and I found this to be really useful. It's not great for big projects, but for little things like this, especially when we're going to be coating the cork in something else, it works really, really well. The first time I tried this, I did just spray the cork itself, but I didn't like the effect that gave. It didn't look right to me. So what I've done is I've just broken off a few bits just to start messing around with. And what we're doing here is preparing the base for painting, and we're just building up the shape of the lava flow that we want. And to do that, I'm just going to use my fingers and my nails and pull bits off until we've kind of got the shapes that we want. So I'm going to put a little bit here. So there's kind of, I'm going to have two paths of lava on this one. So that bit's going to go there. And then let's see if we can, so if we put something else like this here, so we can begin to see there that there's going to be this little channel for the lava coming down through there. Sorry, I haven't got the camera angle great this time, but we'll work with it for now. And then let's do something on the other side. So let's have this here. And then let's put a little piece. So if you see what I'm doing here, I'm pulling all the little edge bits off because I don't want any straight edges from this cork to be visible. So these pieces here, I'm going to be gluing on so that the straight edge is slightly overhanging, and then I can just trim that down. So I'm going to glue these in place and I will be right back. So they're all nicely glued in place now. So I'm going to flip the base over and I'm just going to use my nails to get rid of the excess that's overhanging. Doesn't matter if you pull a little bit too much off and expose the base, because we're going to be adding something else in a minute. So just get it until it's how you like it. So as you can see there, I've slipped and I've taken off an extra bit, but that's fine. So we're going to pull this off. And there we go. That's the first building block in building this lava base. So the next step, because as I mentioned earlier, when I've primed this cork before, the texture that's been left behind has just been a bit too corky. You can kind of tell what it is, and it takes away from that realistic look that we're going for. So in order to combat that, I'm going to be using Vallejo ground texture white stone. Now this is a completely smooth paste. It's not like the pumice I've used in previous videos, and the reason I'm using this instead is because A, it spreads quite easily, and B, when you paint it, it gives this kind of glossy sheen even after you've put a layer of acrylic paint on it. That gloss still comes through. So I quite like it for certain effects. It's not brilliant for some stuff because you don't want a glossy finish. But for this, I think it works really well. So all I'm going to do is take an old paintbrush, an old battered brush that's, poor thing, has been through a lot. And I'm going to start applying this onto my cork, my rocks, and I'm going to be essentially covering the entire base with this. I don't want anything left that looks like cork. So even down the sides, I'm going to fill in any gaps and just trying to make it look a bit more natural and a little bit less like cork. You don't have to be particularly neat. You don't have to get everything flat and even. It's just to cover up that texture. So we're going to do this on all the pieces of cork. But what we're also going to do is add some depth to the base itself. The reason I do this is because, like with this one, it just looks a bit flat. If you look at it from the side, there's no depth there to the lava. It looks painted on. So as I'm applying this, what I'm also going to do is start building it up in between, starting here and then pulling it down towards the base. So we've still got that little area here where you can see the gap between the two pieces of cork, but it's going to be sloping down, so it genuinely looks like the lava is running down through the rocks. So pull that through until you get to around here where you're going to just literally be painting on a really thin layer of this. It just helps to give it that extra something. So I will finish this off and I will come back in a minute and show you how it looks. And there you go. So as you can see, I've covered it all in the white stone paste, and I've created little downward slants in it from here, so we can still see where we need to paint, but it's going to give everything that nice gloss colour, and it's just blended in the texture of that cork so we can't see it. So the next step before we prime is to add our bubbles, and for that we're using my good old friend Silica Gel. Now this is slightly different Silica Gel. I think this came from the PLA that we've got for our 3D printer, and it's kind of a funny browny colour. I'm not sure what it is. It doesn't look like the normal stuff, but it still does the trick. Now while this paste is still wet, you should be able to just drop these on where you want them. And then just ever so lightly press them. And as the paste dries, it will act like a cement and it should hold those bubbles in place. If it doesn't, once this is dried, you don't feel like they're secure, feel free to just pull them off and stick them back on with a bit of blue tack. So I'm going to leave this to dry for probably a good 12 hours because I have put this on quite thickly in parts. So I'm going to leave this overnight and then I'm going to prime it black, and we'll come back and I'll show you how to start painting the lava. I just want to correct myself because at the end of that last segment, when I was talking about the bubbles and if they didn't stick, I said to use blue tack. I don't know where blue tack came from. I obviously meant super glue. If the paste doesn't hold them on, use super glue. I would never recommend using blue tack for anything on your miniatures. I just wanted to clear that up. So as you can see, this has dried and it's been primed. And if I kind of catch that in the light, you can see that, like I said, priming on top of that white stone paste has left a nice glossy finish, and I quite like that for this particular base. But you'll also be able to see that it's caused like a rippling effect on the bottom as well. So when we paint the lava colours over that, it's going to give it that kind of realistic look of movement. So first thing we're going to do is, for the lava, we're going to apply a base coat of Jakero orange. This is just to bring that black back up again to a lighter colour so that it's easier to put the next layers on. So all I'm doing is getting a little bit of that out. Wash my brush off. I don't want to water this down too much, so I'm just going to mix it with a tiny touch of water, because this paint from Citadel, this particular colour, is quite thin anyway, I've found. So yeah, don't overdo it with the thinning. Then I'm just going to prepare my thin brush. So I'm using a brush with quite a thin point on it. These are just some cheap brushes I got from Amazon. And then all we're going to do is take some of that orange and just start applying it over the black wherever the lava will be. Now this won't be a very good first coat. We want to go on relatively thin, and you will be able to see the black underneath it, and I'm not too bothered about that. It's not about getting a nice even orange colour all over this. It's just about bringing that tone back up a couple of levels for the next layers. So anywhere where the lava would be, we're just going to put this on. And it doesn't matter too much if, like I've just done there, if you catch if you catch the rocks a little bit, because we're going to be painting up the side of those rocks anyway, with some of the other colours. So it's important at this point to make sure you completely cover your bubbles as well with this colour, so that they're nice and based and ready. So I will finish that off and I'll be back in a minute. Now, for the next step, we're going to be painting the actual lava effect. And we need to be prepared in advance for this, because we're going to have to work quite quickly, because we want the paints to stay wet. So in my palette here, in each of the little wells, I have put 3 drops of Vallejo Glaze Medium. And I'm going to be adding paints to each of these so that we get a gradient from a kind of darker reddy orange all the way through to a bright yellow. So in the first well, I'm going to be putting half and half Evil Sun Scarlet and Troll Slayer Orange. And I'm just going to put 1 drop of each into the first well. So Evil Sun Scarlet and Troll Slayer Orange. And in the second well, I'm just going to put 2 drops of Troll Slayer Orange. In the third well, I'm going to put 2 drops of Yrial Yellow. In the fourth one, I'm going to put 2 blobs of Flash Gitz Yellow. And in the final one, I'm going to put 2 drops of White Scar. And then I'm going to take a toothpick and I'm going to mix these up so that we get these nice glazes. Now, I haven't tried this with water. I've only tried it with the glaze medium, because I just always prefer to make my glazes with glaze medium. But it's completely up to you. You can try it with water if you want. I think for this particular technique, the glaze medium might be better, because you want to keep some of that viscosity to kind of play with in the later stages. But, you know, give it a try. Try it out with water if you don't have the glaze medium. But the glaze medium, just to let you know, is only, I think it's a couple of quid on eBay. It's not too bad. So let's get these mixed. And there we go. So we've got a nice fiery rainbow in our palette now, and I've managed to get yellow paint all over my hands, but never mind. So the first step for this, and as I've said, we're going to have to move quite quickly, is to take some of the darker reddy stuff, and we're going to put that everywhere. We're going to be liberal with it. We're going to splash it on everywhere that has that orange base coat. And we're moving, like I say, as quickly as possible to try and make sure it doesn't dry. Getting all the way up to the rock. Doesn't matter if you miss the bubbles with this step, because obviously we're going to be lightening the bubbles right down anyway. So that's fine. Splashing it in here. And then just being a bit more careful. You might need to wipe some of it off just to get a thin line down these little tracks that the lava's made. So we've got a nice thick layer. As you can see there, I've slipped and got it on the rock, but I can fix that afterwards. That's not a problem. So then we're going to wash our brush off and get it completely dry. We don't want any extra water mixing in with this. And then we're going to take some orange and we're going to start blobbing it in everywhere. And I'm being very liberal and putting it on top of the bubbles and putting big blobs of it all over the place. And as you can see, as I'm blobbing it in, it's just mixing itself quite naturally with the darker reddy colour. And we want to keep doing this until there's more orange than red showing, really. We want the red to just be like little hints of it. I'm going to put a little bit up there. Again, don't worry if you get it on the rocks, we can fix it later. This is a messy process. And we can keep adding. And a little bit more. And yeah, I think I'm happy with that for the orange layer. And you can see already that it's starting to take on that kind of natural, organic, lava-y look. So the next bit is that we're going to start adding some yellow to this. So this is the Yrial yellow, so the slightly darker yellow. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some on my brush, get a nice blob of it on, and I'm just going to touch it to the top of these bubbles, trying to let the paint do the work rather than pressing the brush on and contaminating my brush with the red and the orange colours. I'm just kind of tapping it on so that it flows naturally down the sides of the bubbles. And you can see where there's big builds up of this glaze, it's just flowing really well off and down into the other colours and making some really nice effects. So that's the bubbles. So then we're going to do similar to what we did with the orange, but we're just going to put some smaller blobs on everywhere. And there. And there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a clean brand new toothpick, and where we've put the yellow, we're just going to start pulling it away in random little swirly patterns. To make these nice little patterns in the lava. And then what you can also do is you can take your toothpick and dip it into the paint to get a bit more, and then just pull it up like that. And you can see how all these colours are kind of blending in together. So I think that bit's a bit too orange, so I'm going to add a bit more yellow around here. And a bit more here. And a little bit here and here. And again, once you've put your yellow on, just hold it in place and use your toothpick to pull the colours around. And if we need to, we can add a little bit more to get it as bright as we want it to be. Making sure that we keep as much yellow as we can around where those bubbles are, because these bubbles are going to be the really kind of hot spots, so we want these to be as bright as possible at the end. And let's just put a bit more here. And this really is a game of trial and error, and you know, just personal taste as well, really, how you want it to look. There's no hard and fast kind of rule about the pattern that this should make or how it should look. So with that initial bit done, what we can do now is leave it to dry for a couple of minutes so that it's not completely dry, but it's starting to dry. And then we'll come back and we will highlight with the two brighter colours. So that's been left for a couple of minutes. And the next thing we're going to do is just start adding some brighter highlights to it to create the hotter parts of the lava. So we're going to take some of the Flash Gitz yellow, and we're just going to get the tip of the brush and just touch it to the tops of these bubbles. Again, allowing it to flow downwards if it wants to. And you can see there some of it's flowed down, and just let it do what it naturally wants to do. And once we've got it on the bubbles, we can take our toothpick again and get a little bit of the bright yellow and just mix it in and pull it through where you've got the slightly darker yellow. You don't want to be putting this yellow on anything that's orange or red, because it will be too much of a sharp contrast. So just wherever you've already got the yellow, we're just touching this in. Now I can see here that this bit and this bit are a little bit too dark for me, so I'm going to go back to my slightly darker yellow, get some on my toothpick and put it in there and pull it down, and then do the same again on this side. And again, like I say, if you get it on the rocks, doesn't matter, you don't have to be neat with this. It's all about the blending. Get some in there. And then, for a final touch on the lava, we're going to take some of this white, get it on your toothpick, and we're literally going to find the brightest spots and just put a tiny blob of white in these areas. So there, there. And this just represents the very hottest parts of the lava. So these are usually in the middle of the lava flow rather than towards the edge where the rock is. A little dot there, and then again the other end of your toothpick, just pull them ever so slightly into the surrounding colours. So it looks more like it's flowing rather than just a couple of blobs. And then what we're going to do now is on these edges here, just going to take some of the darker colours from the edge and just pull them slightly up the rocks, just to give that illusion that some of it's kind of splashed, or and we're just pulling it up the sides, which is the reason why I said it doesn't matter too much if you get it on the rocks, because we're putting it on the rocks on purpose now. And just, yeah, pull it up. Now I can't lift this up to show you because obviously everything's still wet. So there we have it. That is my toothpick lava method. So once you've got these swirls and patterns and everything that you're happy with, she says, add in some more to it, leave this to dry and leave it a good few hours so that it's all completely dry, because obviously you've put a lot of liquid on this, a lot more than you normally would just painting a layer of paint. So leave it to dry for a few hours, and then once you're comfortable that it's completely dry, come back to it, and then we can do the final dry brushing and glazing and highlighting. I actually ended up leaving this to dry overnight. I don't know if it's something to do with the temperature in this room, but it did take a long time for these glazes, this thick layer, to dry. So I've left it overnight, and now we're ready to move on to the final steps. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of dry brushing on the black rocks, just to give them a little bit more of that kind of charred look, if you like. So we're just going to go for a very dark grey. So I've chosen Skavenblight Dinge from Citadel, but you can use any kind of dark grey for this. So I'm just going to put some of that on my piece of kitchen roll. And take a small dry brush and just wipe most of it off on my tissue paper. And then we're just going to lightly dry brush around the edges. And this is only for a very subtle look. You might not even be able to see this on camera, but when you do it yourself, you'll be able to see it. Of course, this is all personal taste. You can leave this step out completely if you just want your lava to be completely black, or you can choose a lighter color. You can basically do whatever you like. I like to use this one. It just picks out some of the raised bits, gives it a bit more definition. Just go back over there. So once you've done that, the next step is to do the final highlight on your bubbles. And for this, I like to use fluorescent paint. So I've got some Vallejo Fluorescent Yellow here. And all I'm going to do is put a tiny bit of that on my palette. I'm going to take a nice small brush, pick this up, and I'm just getting a tiny bit of this yellow on my brush, and I'm just going to go onto the very top parts of the bubbles with it. Now this will look quite, quite stark and obvious for a while until it dries, and then once it dries, it just gives it that glowing effect. And we're just doing the very top of each bubble. And there you go, gives it that nice glow. And then what we want to do is we're going to recreate this darkest colour that we had at the beginning into a thin glaze. So I'm going back to my glaze medium. I'm just going to put a couple of drops in there. And then back to our original Evil Sun Scarlet and Troll Slayer Orange. And put a tiny bit of each into your glaze medium. Just to get that nice dark orangey red colour. And we're going to mix it up. until we've got... Now, for this particular effect, you don't have to mix this all the way. You can leave it kind of marbled, which is what I'm going to do. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to use this to glaze all around these inside edges. So you can get this a bit closer. So you can see where I've pulled the paint up to create that kind of splashing effect. But next what we're going to do is create the glowing effect. Because lava has this glow to it that would reflect off the darker surfaces. So to do this glaze properly, I'm going to take my kitchen roll here. And I'm going to dip the tip of my brush in this paint and load it up. But then I'm going to dab it onto my kitchen roll so I take off most of it. So you can barely see anything on the paintbrush. But then when you come to apply it, it just adds that tiny little bit of colour without being too saturated. And we're going to do this along the edges of all the rocks. And again, this is one of those things I'm not quite sure how well it will come up on camera, but when you do it, you will see the difference it makes. And one thing you can do as well is if doing one coat doesn't quite give the aesthetic that you're looking for, you can do another one once it's dried. That's the great thing about glazing. And it's always a case of less is more. So when you do your first layer of glazing, especially onto a black surface, you're going to think that you've almost wasted your time, like there's nothing there. But the key to glazes and achieving this glowing effect is to build it up in very small layers. So brush it on. And let it dry, and then go back over it if you want to. So there we go. I'm quite happy with that effect. So once your glazes and your final highlights have dried, which shouldn't take too long, there is one more thing you can do, and this is completely optional. Because I like my lava to have a gloss look to it. I like it to look like it's shining. I think it adds to the glowing effect. So what I like to do is apply a layer of Ardcoat from Citadel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my glazes to dry, and then I'll come back in a bit after painting the rim and putting a layer of Ardcoat on, and I'll show you what it looks like. As I said, I have now painted the rim black, and I've also added a layer of Citadel Ardcoat. Now you can see how glossy that makes it. Personally, I prefer that aesthetic for these lava bases, but I will leave that choice completely up to you. So that's it. That's my toothpick lava method. Now, I appreciate it's not the quickest way to do a lava base. There are much quicker ways. But if you've got a little bit of extra time and you want to add that extra depth to it, then why not give it a go? So I will be back on Wednesday with the first video in my new series Back to Basics, where I will be showing you how to make some very simple wet mud style bases. So until then, you can follow me on Facebook at Debsworth's Hobby Studio, and I've also started an Instagram account, and I have no idea what I'm doing on Instagram. So I think if you just search for Debsworth Hobby Studio on there, you should be able to find my posts, and feel free to give me a follow. And until then, happy hobbying.